Alright, so in this video, we're going to try to add edit functionality to our user form. However, before we do that, I want to address something I forgot to do in delete section. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Right now, if I go here and search for one of people in here, and you can see how that shows up here. That's the customer number 13. And let's just keep that customer's name in mind. So if I press delete right now to delete that customer and click confirm, that will disappear here. However, if I go back here and search for that same person, see that person still shows up in the search results, because even though we removed it from here, it's still in the array we loaded to do the search. So we want to make sure that this doesn't happen. So there are a couple of ways to fix it. One way is to simply just reload the array. So the way I could do that, I could just go back here under this. Actually, let's go to main HTML. This is where we are. What I could do after we did this remove, which is what happens when we run this delete function, we could immediately after that just call the function that updates the list. So that would be this function we did on top here. See this set data for search? So we could simply just copy that, go back, and run this function here, and that should fix that. I don't want to reload the data every single time, so I'm gonna handle it in a different way. So I'm gonna remove this, and what I'm gonna do after we delete that customer, I'm also going to go to the actual data array, which is this array that we store this entire data, and find that customer and remove that customer from the list. So to do that, after we found out that this was deleted successfully, we'll remove the actual box, and then we'll take our data array, and we want to be able first to find which line do we actually need to delete. So to do this, I need to again search in that ID column to find which line it is that needs to be deleted. So I'm going to take that data and map that to a new array. And this will accept a callback. And for each row in that data, we're going to return the first column in that data, which will be IDs. Now, all of these IDs, I want to also specifically convert to string and to lowercase. So let's go ahead and save this to a new variable here. And now in this array, we'll just go ahead and search for the ID we're looking for this customer ID we have right here on top. So I'm going to take that IDs array and do index of and search for that customer ID. And again, just to make sure everything works out well for this, I'm going to also convert it to string and to lowercase. So this should give us the position in that array. I'm going to call that index. Now, once we get the position in the array for that customer, now we know which line needs to be removed from our data array. So we can do that by taking our data array and splice the row in that index. So we'll just do that index, and we need to remove just one row, so we'll do 1. And this should take care of it. So let's just go ahead and test this, make sure all of this works the way it's supposed to. I'm going to save, go back, reload this thing, go to search, and let's search for one of our customers here. I want to get somebody I can actually see, so there it is. So now if I delete this customer, now if I go back and search for that person, good. We took care of the problem. Now this should work the way it's supposed to. Now let's move on to our edit. So how is this supposed to work? After we search for a customer, I want to be able to now click on this edit button. And when I click on that, what should happen, we should open the edit form. Now, if you remember, I did assign that edit view to this home in the beginning, which I said I'm going to remove at some point. But this is that actual view that needs to be loaded when we click on one of those edit buttons. So let's go ahead and take care of that. We want to make sure when we click on edit button, this view loads. So I'm going to go back here. And first of all, let's see if that edit button has some sort of identifier on it. So if I go to search, this is our template, and we have this edit button. It doesn't have a good class to ID this, so let's give it a good class. So this will be our identifier for this button. So now let's go to our script. And we need to handle the click event again. So we already have this click event firing right here. So we're just going to add another if statement for that button. So let me just paste that in here for a second. Copy paste one of these if blocks. And I'm just going to replace this class. It's going to be edit button. So now we know if we get to this, that means that edit button was clicked. And what do we want to happen when somebody clicks on that edit button? We want to load that edit view. So let's go check where we load that edit view. We've done that before. See, we've assigned it to this load edit customer view. And to do that, we're really just running this. So I'm going to copy this line, scroll down, paste it right in here for the time being at least. So let's save this and see what happens. So let's click on edit and see if that takes us to edit view. Great, it does. So that was a good step. Now what we want to happen after we go to this edit view, we want to make sure that as we're sending that person here to edit, that fills up all the information for that person here. And the way we're going to do that is by first sending that person's ID to this view as we're clicking on that edit button. To make it easy, I'm going to back again to my search template, and I'm going to make sure that this template, when we create this, has data attribute to get the ID. Now, if you remember how we did that, we did it for one of these buttons, and we're not going to be doing that in the template itself. We'll be just adding it to this edit button, and we need to do it while we're loading all those results from the search. So I'm going to go back and find the search function, which is right here. In here, we're going to find that button using that class. So once we find that button, we want to make sure we set this customer ID data attribute to the customer ID. So it's really going to be pretty much the same thing we did for our delete button. So I'm just going to put edit button here instead. And we're going to do dataset customer ID should be R0. And 0 is the first column from our data, which has all the IDs for our customers. Now, this is just going to add data attribute to our edit buttons. So if we go back now and search, if I right click on this edit, go inspect, you'll see now we have this data customer ID attribute 73. So what that means now, we can just grab that customer ID from that edit button when we click on it and send it to that view. So if you remember the way we did this function for our views, which is right here, we made it in a way that we can pass some additional arguments to this function. So for example, we can pass a callback function that needs to run after that view is loaded. And then we can also pass parameters to that function if we have to. Those are the options I'm going to use to be able to make this work. So I'm going to assign a callback and parameters. So I'm going to go back to the place where we're using this function, which is going to be this line. And right in here, we're going to assign two things. We're going to assign a callback, and that will be the function that's going to run after this view loads. We're going to call it after edit view load, comma, and then parameters we're going to send to that particular view. And I'm going to send that again as another object like this. And parameters I want to send that ID of the customer. I'm going to call it cost ID, just like that. And that cost ID we're going to get from the button that was clicked. We can get to that button by using this eTarget. That eTarget is going to have that data set attribute on it. So I'm going to take that eTarget and do dot dataset dot and whatever we called it. I think it was customer ID, but let's go find out. There it is, customer ID. So now that we did this, we need to make sure we have the callback function to be able to accept these parameters. So I'm going to create that function. I'm going to copy this, go on top here. And this will accept those params. And that parameters argument is basically going to be this. Let's just copy and paste it as a comment so we can work with this. So what it's going to be customer ID is whatever is the ID of that customer. Let's say 32. Which means now we should be able to grab that ID and place it, let's click on this home, in this customer ID box, in that edit view. So let's go check what's the ID for that customer ID box. So edit customer. See, customer ID is the ID for that. Great. So I'm going to copy that, go back to my script, and find that element using that ID. And I want to make sure I set the value for that to whatever ID was sent. And we can get to it by taking this params dot cost ID. All right, let's try this again. Let's go back, close this, reload. Now I'm going to go to search and click C73. If I click edit, that sends this 73 here. Now I don't really want this to be possible to edit. So I'm going to make this field read only. So I'm going to go back to this edit form and just this input, I'm going to make it read only. And what I want to do next, I want to now fill up the first name, last name, and the phone number, which means we have to go to our spreadsheet, figure out all this information, and bring back and fill it up in this list. So we need a function that will be able to get the customer's information using the ID. And again, because it's something we do in a spreadsheet, it's going to be a server-side function. So I'm going to go back here. Let's go to our server-side functions and create another function here. And that will accept an ID, which will be the customer ID. So what we need to do in this function, we need to grab that ID we're searching for, go and find that ID in this first column and figure out which row that information is on. Which means we're going to pretty much do something very similar to what we did in here. So I'm just going to copy all of these lines, paste them over here. So we're basically getting our spreadsheet, the worksheet, and then we're getting this list of customers, and then we're searching for that customer with this position. Then we get a row number where we found that customer. That's pretty much what we do up to this point. Now in our delete function, then we just went ahead and deleted that row. Now in this case, we don't want to delete that row. Instead, we want to go here and get the information in that row. And we're really going to get the information for this part. We're probably not going to get the ID. Let's now do the part where we get that information from that row. So we'll take that worksheet again and do get range. And the row number we need to get this information from is that row number we were able to find here. The column we need to start getting this information from, again, if we want to include ID in this, we're going to do from 1. I'm just going to include it just in case we decide we need it. The number of rows, we just need one customer's information, so it's going to be one row. And number of columns is going to be pretty much however many columns we have in our data, in this case, 4. And I'm going to do get values to get that to an array. So this will be our customer information. So this is going to come as an array of arrays. So it's going to be something like an array, and inside of this we'll have the ID, the name, comma separated, etc. Now what we want to do with this information, we want to basically send it back to our user form so we can populate those results in those added boxes. So that means we need to return this information. Now, I'm not sure if I want to return everything, so you could just say return this entire array, which is really fine. So you could also do an object to identify which column is which. So in my case, I'm going to send back an object because that's what I prefer to do. It's more descriptive. So I'm going to return, and this is going to be an object. And in this object, we're going to have some properties. So we'll have cost ID. And that will be basically this 45. Now, the way I can get to it, I'm going to take this customer info, and I need to get inside of this first row to get inside of this array, and then get to this 45. So, which means it's going to be that, and then 0 for that row, and then 0 for the first column. Now, you could also just do 0 here, so you don't have to do this, I suppose. Why don't we do that? Let's do it this way. Similar to this, we need to just get the rest. So I'm going to do the first name, last name, phone number. Good enough. Now let's go to our front end user form and call that function and get that information. So I'm going to go back to where we stopped. So we stopped at this point that we just populated the ID for that person. So now we want to get the rest of the information. So we're going to do Google script run again. So we want to run this get customer by ID function and provide the ID for the person we're trying to find, which is going to be this customer ID again from parameters. So now we're going to send that ID over to go get that person's information, which is going to come back in this callback function. And this callback function is going to accept that return, which will basically be that customer's information that comes back from this. So that's what we're going to get back here. Once we get it back, this customer info is going to have the same properties we just did in here. See this customer ID, first name, last name, phone, which we should be able to basically grab and populate in appropriate boxes. So what are the appropriate boxes in our edit form? It's this first name, last name, phone number, IDs. So let's go ahead and fill those up. So for first name, input box ID is first name. So we're going to find that box and fill the value with this customer info first name, which is going to be whatever we send from here, this first name. And then we need the same for last name and phone. So I'm going to go back and basically just repeat this line a couple of times. Let's test this. So you can see there's that delay again because we call the spreadsheet, it gets the data, and then it populates this form. But we got this populated. I'm going to handle those cases when we have to wait so we can do some loading thing while it's happening. For now, this works. Now the next step is going to be to be able to click on the save button and make sure if we make any changes, we go back and change that person's information. What that means now, we need to be able to create a function, again on the server side, to update customers' information using that customer's ID and all this other information we're doing for that customer. So I'm going to go back and create that function. And we're going to pass ID, again, to figure out which line we should be editing. And we're going to pass the actual information that is supposed to be changed. So the first step is going to be to go find which line, again, needs to be modified, which is largely going to be this. So we're going to get the spreadsheet, get the worksheet, go get the IDs, search for the position, find the row. Now we need to just go and overwrite the data with the new data we'll be getting from this customer info. So to overwrite our data, we need to take our worksheet and get the range that needs to be overwritten. Now I want to update the information in that row, so the row number. I need to update basically whatever we place in first, last name, and phone number. So I don't want to update the actual ID. So I need to start from column number 2 and then update 3 columns after that. So column number 2, the number of rows we're updating just 1. The number of columns was 3. First name, last name, and the phone. So we're going to take that and set values. And this set values will accept an array of arrays. So it's going to be an array, and then it has to basically be another array which has all those values comma separated. So I'm just going to get that from this customer info. So if this line gets really long, you can actually send these 2 new lines like this. And since there's only 3, that's pretty much what I'm going to do here. First name, the last name, and the phone. Comma separated all 3 of those. The last one should not have a comma. And that's pretty much it. This should update the line. Now we can simply just return something here. So for now, I'm just going to say return true, even though that's not really necessary. So now we have a function that we should be able to run. It's called edit customer by ID. So we need to be able to run this from our user form. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to my form and figure out when this is supposed to run. Well, this is supposed to run when we click on the save button. Let's go figure out what this save button has as an ID, if anything. So that save button doesn't have one, so let's give it some sort of class. And maybe while we're at this, let's give this one a class too. Or maybe we should use an ID for this. Good enough. So now we want to act when this button is clicked. So this is still going to be inside of that div app because we're loading those views in that div app, which means this same event handlers should still work. So I'm just going to add this here for a second and just copy one of these lines. And I'm going to say if that target matches that ID, and in CSS selectors, the ID would be the pound key. So if we get that, we know that button was clicked. So now we're going to run a function. So I'm going to call this function edit customer. And now let's go ahead and create that function. So once we hit save, what we want to do, basically, we want to grab this ID and all of this information and run that function that we've just made here to update that information. So I'm just going to go back and paste this here before I forget this function's name. And it's, again, going to be the same sort of situation. We need to do the Google script run thing. Let me just copy and paste that. The only difference now, instead of get customer ID, we're going to edit customer by ID. That's the function we're going to run. we're going to send these two parameters. So with success handler, all of this stuff, well, it's not going to be happening after this save is successful. So all of these, I'm going to remove out of that and paste it in here. We might want to do something after that success, but not this. Now, lucky for us though, all of this is pretty close to what we need. So what we need to do, we need to basically set an object with all of these first name, last name, phone number properties. So I'm just going to go here, set a variable, and then reverse all of this pretty much. So we have this customer info that we're going to set to an object like this. And then we're going to set some properties on it. So we're going to make the first name, whatever's in that first name box. The same thing. We're grabbing that information from the form now and placing in this object. Now we also need that customer's ID, which we're also going to get from that form. Let's go see what that's called. It's called apparently customer-ID. And this one is not going to be part of the object. It's going to be separate. After we grab all of that information, we're going to run this Google script run. With success handler, this is just going to return true or false. Let's just call it RES, results. We're not going to be using that for now. But we're going to run this added customer by ID function. And we're going to send ID, which is this ID that I just did here, and customer info, which is this customer info. So that's all we need to send to that function to be able to update our information. I think that should do it. So let's save this, go back and see what happens. Click edit. Let's try to update the last name. So let's try to pay attention what happens here in row 6. Gonna hit save. And as you can see, that was updated in the background. Now let's also change Lawrence's phone number. So it starts with 570 right now. Let's change it to something like 305 and hit save. That works just fine. Let's also update the first name. That works. So we're able to go back and edit this customer's information. Now let's try to add some sort of message maybe below that says it was successful. So I'm going to go to Bootstrap. Let's try to get some of this. See this alert. That should be fine. Third one. I'm going to copy that and go to this. Let's find that added customer view and we'll place it below all of this right here. Do some messaging for this. I'm going to say changes saved. And we want to make sure we assign some sort of ID to this so we can find this alert box. That's going to be that. Now, I don't want this to be visible by default. So this should be invisible by default. So I'm just going to either do display none or invisible. I think I'm going to do invisible in this case. So what should happen now if I go back? Well, actually, let's not do invisible for a second and let's go back, take a look at this. So I'm just going to click on this home to get the edit view. See, it says save changes. Again, I'm going to worry about the spacing and all this other stuff later. But for now, we have this. I want this to not be visible by default. So right now, if I go back and reload this, see, nothing shows up. But it should show up after we click save and everything is saved. So what we're going to do to make that happen, we want to basically remove that invisible class, this one, from this element after everything is successful. So this is where we're going to go back to this. This is our whole function we run to edit. And if it's successful, we're going to go here. What we're going to do, we're going to find that element using its ID. And we want to take the class list and remove invisible from the list. So what should happen now if I go to this, open this, and go to search? I should be able to search for one of these customers. Type something else. Now if I hit save, after that was successful, it was changed, we get changes saved. Now the next part is probably going to be after we display this, after a little bit, we want to probably remove this changes saved message. We don't want this to stay here forever. So for that, after we did this invisible, we're going to run this set timeout. And this has a function and it has a second parameter that's basically the number of milliseconds. So we have a function here, comma, and then how long it's going to wait until it runs that function. So I'm going to say 2000 milliseconds. That should be about 2 seconds. And whatever is going to happen inside of this function right here. So what I want to happen, I want to add that invisible class back so it's not visible anymore. So I'm just going to repeat this. Instead of remove, we're going to add invisible. So if I save this, go back and reload this, hopefully that should take care of our problems. So we go under search, search for Lawrence again, click edit. It's going to bring this. Now, I'm going to change the last name for Lawrence. Again, that should update in the background. So if I hit save, that's saved. And then see, the message is gone. And if you wanted that to be longer, you could do like 3000 milliseconds or whatever. Good enough. We have our edit functionality working. I don't really want to load that edit on this home view, but we'll take care of that later on. For now, we got search working, delete working, edit working. The next step is going to be add customer view. So we want to be able to come in here, add some information, click add customer, and basically add a new customer to this list. And that's what we're going to cover in the next video. But for this one, that should be it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.